Hello everyone. Like I was saying on Twitter, I'm sorry about the late start. Today is my roommate's birthday actually, so we were out celebrating that at a birthday dinner, hence the 9 o'clock start for me. But I do plan to get a stream out today, specifically because on Saturday I will be camping, so I will not be able to have access to the internet, nor would I want to be avoiding my friends and family. So today I would like to talk to you more about the environment project, and as you can see, Jeffrey is here on the screen running. So we hope to see some new developments with Jeffrey. I will warn you, they have not been too spectacular as far as I've seen, but the bulk of the development has been on the coding aspect on my end. So the changes I have made have been lazy changes, and they have not fixed the problems, but they have merely made the problems a little easier to work with. So Jeffrey is still crashing on the AI side and on the driver side, and what I have done in order to make my life easier is I have written programs that will restart the programs that are supposed to be running if they crash. So if Jeffrey here crashes at any point during the stream, he will immediately restart it with a new randomized environment because of those programs I have running. So I'm simply running the program that restarts Jeffrey instead of running the actual driver itself. So I'm just checking to see if anyone's in the chat. So like I said, these are lazy fixes, and they are not fixes at all. They are simply a means of making sure that Jeffrey can run constantly while I am out of the room. So this means that I have actually been running Jeffrey for a large portion of the time between this stream and the last stream. I believe I made those changes and fixes almost immediately after the stream on Saturday. So I have made those changes, and now if the AI crashes or if Jeffrey crashes, then he will immediately restart with a new randomized environment, which is not necessarily a bad thing. If he's in a rut like he is here where he's not doing anything, he will be forced into a new environment so that he can make some adjustments based off of that. Now I have seen a little bit more of the problem of Jeffrey using the charge bonus to his advantage. So he will sprint into a wall so he is not moving and keep firing the gun. Now I haven't found any evidence that this is a conscious decision. I did, however, make the instinct reader I was talking about, and if I have some time later in the stream, I will show that on screen. It's exactly what it sounds like. It reads through the instincts and then prints out in a word form, semi-word form, sort of code logic form of what the decisions are. And what you will see if I show you that is that the word error will pop up many times throughout the decisions, and this is because there are errors in the code, in the data, and these are not computer problems. I believe they are code problems, but what I have deduced is that they are problems that are happening sometime after the testing process. So if the AI tests the score, if the AI tests the new traits and denotates a score for that set of traits, then the some point between when the AI is testing it and when the traits get saved as a new as the new best for that environment, there is an error which is shifting the data. And when I mean shifting the data, I don't mean literally in terms of a variable size or allocation of memory. I mean there's a bunch of numbers in a text file, and maybe one of them is getting removed, so numbers are moving up. And the problem is when you run something for a long period of time, then numbers get moved further up and further up. And so what's happening is when I look at the instinct reader, and I'm pretty sure that the instinct reader isn't the problem because it's crashing, for one, that the whole program is crashing, and I mean the AI and the driver, not the instinct reader. And the instinct reader is almost perfectly copied from the driver, which means it's reading it in the same way the driver's reading it in. So even if there was an error, it's reading it in the same way. So the output is what Jeffrey is actually seeing. So, and what the decisions are being made off of. So whatever the situation is, it's not a problem with the instinct reader. But like I was saying, there are errors, and there's also things that aren't coming up as errors but are still problematic. So one thing in particular is that some variables are being set to 3-digit numbers, which doesn't make any sense because the output variables can only be a number between 0 and 3, I believe 2 actually. No, 3. Because 0 means you don't move, 1 means you do move forward, and 2 and 3 are rotating either clockwise or counterclockwise. I'm not sure which one is which, but it's not too significant because that's for the AI to figure out. These numbers should be from 0 to 3, and the problem is that the data from other areas where it's possibly in the if statement for if the x coordinate is greater than 100, then if that 100 gets shifted up into a different spot or down into the spot where it's actually making the decision, then you can set the flashlight to 100, which would make no sense. It'd be the same as turning it off, but the problem is that that 100 shouldn't be there, because when the parent program initially writes the traits, there is no problem in how it's writing and how it's mutating. The problem is that if an error occurs later and the text file is edited to be in a different order, then the errors of that text file are being propagated into the next generation. So that next generation of programs is receiving errors as not in the mutation process, but in the mating process. So because the best program or the second best program have problems in them, they are adding those problems into the new generation, and those new generations cause crashes. not the initial problem. So that's why it's been a little hard for me to trace that error in the code. I think I've pinpointed where it should be, but I have not checked exactly that. So what I'm assuming the problem will be should be somewhere at the end of the child program, which tests the fitness of the traits. So when the child program runs through, it assigns a score for the set of traits, and then at the bottom of the child program, it rewrites the traits with that new score. And what I think is happening is that a number is being removed somewhere in that process. So then instead of being a total, instead of it going to a total of 300, I think it's 392 numbers in the text file, there's only 391. But if the number that is deleted is the top number, then all of the data is shifted up one, and that's what's causing the errors. If it were the bottom number that would be would be cut off, there would be no problem, because all of the other numbers would still be in the correct area, in the correct spot. But there would just be a problem if it got to decision 10 and was making decisions using the else statement. But that's not the case. There is problems like that, but I think the problem is because if there's a number cut off at the top, then trying to think of the right words here. So if there's a number cut off at the top, then the total number of numbers in the text file is one smaller. So that means if the child program tries to access the 10th decision, and it reads in the 10th decision, so it reads in for the else statement, it's trying to read in the null character I have provided for the text file so that it can be easily copied as a number, which it is not. It is a string. So then when it tries to read that in and tries to compare it to a number, it cannot use that number because it is actually, I believe it's trying to turn that string into an integer, which doesn't make any sense. Because it's trying to read in the text version of a number and turn it into an integer, but because it's not a number to begin with, it can't be turned into an integer. So I believe that is where the problem should be. I will be checking that in the days to come. And so what I wanted to talk to you guys about is the situation where, so if I fix the problem, then this running of the AI and the environment project will be null and void, because the problem is, like I said, these errors propagate through to the next generations. And so what I would basically have to do is go in and fix all those errors, but the problem is I don't know what number was deleted. So even if I figured out the spot that was holding that number, I wouldn't know the exact number that was deleted. So it's pointless for me to try to go through, I believe, what is now 370 different instincts and try and fix all of them, as opposed to simply using this as a benchmark for something that I want the new perfected program to do better than. And so what I would probably do is simply copy this project into a new folder and run it again. I will still have this running of the AI available so I can make comparisons. So I'm actually going to close this and restart it to see if we can get a different environment. Alright, so there's 2 food pellets. We'll see if anything happens with that. So the problem is, like I was saying, is that if the data is shifted, then the decisions that Jeffrey is making are not necessarily lining up. But the thing is, with an AI like this especially, that shouldn't matter. It does in terms of efficiency, but in terms of whether or not the AI can reach the goal, it doesn't necessarily stand in its way. Because if you think about an analogy to an organism, so let's look at just the human being, for instance. Now, we constantly have mutations like this, and the problem with these mutations is that usually they are malicious. They don't help us in any way, and so these mutations are actually quite similar to the mutations that we're seeing here in almost perfect metaphor or perfect simile, because the DNA, when it's read, is actually it will miss the mark of where it's supposed to start. So the polypeptide chain that it makes is incorrect. The transcript of the DNA is incorrect. It started at the wrong marker, so it makes it makes a protein, and that protein doesn't help us. So it's not the protein we need, and every once in a while the protein will be what we need. So it'll be something that we didn't know we needed. So it will help us out, but the problem with that is that it's such a small probability that it's only seen when you look at how it's propagated over many and many of years of generations of human beings. So there are things, and that's basically how evolution happens, is that these small tweaks in the DNA occur, and then in the next generation, when that DNA is duplicated, it propagates through, because those cells don't die. They actually do better than the other cells, so then they continue to propagate. And also it can possibly propagate into the next generation of children, because if it ends up becoming such a significant part of that human, then it can affect the offspring. So the overall idea I was getting at is, it's basically like these errors are basically like a disease. And so the problem is, it's so stuck in now that I can't fix the problem. I can fix the source. So even if I fixed the source and kept running it, the parent traits it would be using for each environment are still infected. So this infection of errors can only be purged by completely removing every infected instinct, and the easiest way to do that is to just start over the learning process. Now, what I'm hoping is, if I fix this problem and Jeffrey can actually make efficient decision changes as opposed to waiting for these mutations to work in his favor, the actual learning process will be much quicker than even this. So I'm hoping that by the time that the fixed program has run, we will see much more intelligent decisions and progress being made by the AI. Now, actually, right now you can see what I was talking about. The AI has decided to keep the battery at almost zero, and is actually going to zero, but because it's in the light, it's constantly adding on battery power before it checks to see whether it needs to turn off the flashlight or the gun or the sprint. So it's keeping the rate of score at a constant 2,500, and that is actually a very good score. So in terms of the AI's knowledge, this is the best thing it can be doing right now. the only way it could beat that is by going in an extreme distance out from the light source. Now, what I plan to do in the void space between this running and the next, assuming I can fix the problem that's causing these errors, is tweak the score system so that the fitness does not favor things like this. Now, I still want Jeffrey to favor coming to the light when his battery is dead, but it's also, and so I don't know that I'll necessarily nerf the scoring system on that so much, but there are other things, like firing the gun for once. It initially, for one frame, when he actually fires the gun, spikes the score pretty high. And the problem with doing that is that it's a score we don't actually see in the rate of score because it only lasts one frame. But in the child program, where it is based off of a total score, which is essentially an average score in terms of statistics because it could easily be divided by how long it took, then it adds a lot to the total, assuming that Jeffrey can get several fires off over the course of that time. So I will be either removing that or adding a similar idea to collecting food pellets. Also, I want to look into a problem I've been thinking about where, so the problem is that Jeffrey's turning mechanism is based off of a radian system. So radian is 0 through 2 pi. But the problem is I only allowed him to turn integer radians. I don't think it's exactly integer, but it's small ticks. And the problem with that is that if there's a decision that is based off of him looking exactly at something, then the decision will never proc. But I don't know if I want to mess with that, because I'd like to see the AI figure that out on its own. Because there is ways that it can do it. So let's say if it knew that it was greater than, then it has to, if it's looking greater at an angle greater than where the food pellet is, then it would have to go forward, or it would have to lower the angle. But then if the angle is lower, then it would have to get greater. But the problem is if the food pellet is between those two integer positions, then the AI will keep flickering between those two but never lock on. Or if the AI was simply turning until it equaled the same as the direction, until its direction equaled the direction that the food pellet is in, then that would never happen, because it could technically, out of probability, happen, but the mechanics of it doesn't really make sense efficiency wise. But there are ways that the AI could still find and eat the food pellets. Now, so if it gets close to the direction, to the angle, then it can move forward and then readjust its angle once it's closer. So I don't know. It's something that I've been tossing around my head. I don't know if there's a fix for it, but it's just something that I've been considering, the idea that it could be causing efficiency problems. So I will be looking into that, and I hope to tweak the whole scoring system to be more in favor of survival, but at the same time to stay faithful to the idea that the AI needs to figure things out on its own. So I don't want to completely reward it and force it in the direction of the survival that I'm expecting, because what I'm expecting may not be the best way to play the game. And the problem is, I'm designing the game, so when I design a game, I'm trying to think of the best way to play it and trying to design it around that. So it's a little bit of a paradox, but there are things like how I was saying with the AI shooting the wall here while sprinting into it, and in terms of survival, that may not seem very smart to you, but you can see that the score is up in the 2000s, so it is being heavily rewarded for doing that, and it figured that out, so it's continuing to do that. So the problem with that is longevity, so I'm thinking that I should make the health drop and rise a more significant portion of the scoring system, so that it will drown out the benefits of sprinting into the wall while shooting. But we will see how that works out. Now, I said that I would show the instinct reader. I'm just gonna make sure there's nobody asking questions. I'm not seeing any. So I'll just close out of Jeffrey real quick. See if I can pull up a better. Is this gonna be able to show the instinct reader? Let's see if I can get this to show this. Okay, so actually I don't think this is going to work, because I want it to stay running when I read something in. So if I go F5, that is the entire screen. Okay, let me try and get this smaller for you guys. Okay, so hopefully we'll be able to see what we want to with this. Let me pick out an instinct. Let's just pick one at random that has a high score. So it looks like instinct 347 has a decent score of 22,606. So get out of edit. Okay, so what did I say? Instinct 347.txt, and so it reached a decent score of 22,606, but these are the only decisions it is making right now. So it has one decision. It is an if statement with one elif and one else statement. So the so it's checking to see if the flashlight is equal to the distance of the first unknown, so the closest unknown. So if the distance, if it was right on top of the first unknown, then it would be equal to when the flashlight is 0, and it would turn the flashlight on. That's actually a decent decision, now that I think of it, because if it runs into a rock and it doesn't know what it is, but the radar's on, then it could turn the flashlight on. So I'll give it that. But then there's nothing here saying it should be moving. Now, this could work dynamically with a decision from another environment. So if the other environment caused if it was an environment that had a lot of different unknowns, then this could be beneficial if that environment set it going forward and then it ran into a rock. Then it would turn the flashlight on. So I'll give this one some credit. The elif is if the flashlight equals the flashlight, then it turns on the radar. So that's a little bit of a strange one. The reason why there's so many flashlights in here is because the flashlight is the first variable I put in, and the null state for the traits is 1. So it's the initial trait file is a long string of 1s, and that's why the flashlight gets thrown in there a lot, because if it doesn't change anything about the traits, then the default is 1. So that's why we see a bunch of these if flashlights equal flashlights and if flashlight equals 1, or so yeah, that's why this is happening. But so this basically, if it runs into something that it doesn't know what it is, then it turns the flashlight on, and that changes the environment, so that does its job. If the it just turns on the radar no matter what, which isn't a bad decision because the radar doesn't eat up that much battery life. And then if none of those are true, it turns the flashlight on anyway. So that is kind of a dumb decision. But it's not necessarily bad. I'm not sure exactly what the environment is that brings this up. It's a little harder to search through the cases and find which environment it's talking about. So let me find a different... I want to see if I can get the errors to show up on this. So I'm just trying to find a text file that has a lot of different changes in it. This one looks decent, so we'll go... which one was that? That was 329. So instinct 329.txt, enter. Still no errors, but it's just because it's one decision. So this one is not even going to consider the rest of the if statement, because the first one will always be true and it's going to turn the flashlight on forever. I mean, it's not bad at scoring points because the flashlight being on scores points for it, but the program as a whole is not too intelligent. So let's go one more. Actually, I'm going to go to the top in hopes that it will be more intelligent programs. Okay, let's just look at Instinct 1 because it seems to be well introduced. It has a score of 282,464. So this is Instinct 1. So inst1.txt. Now we have 7 decisions, and you will see in this file that there's a bunch of ones that say error like this on the. I'm making sure we can see it on the screen. So okay, so that's the window we're working with. Let me pull this over to the side so I can see what's being viewed. Okay, so we'll get the first decision. So you can see it scored 282,464, and so the first decision, it's reading in, it's seeing if the furthest away unknown distance is the same as food 5, which could be possible in this scenario. So if this is a scenario that doesn't have anything in the environment, then these variables are both being set to the same null value, which I believe is 1000, because I wanted that distance to be really far away, so that the array sorting function would shove those variables to the back. So that could be true, and it sets gun to 2, which does nothing. So assuming this is true, none of these would be involved, but we'll go ahead and read them. If the flashlight is equal to unknown direction 72, now that could be possible. I believe the unknown directions are initially, I think the directions are initially set to a random number between 1 and 6, which is what I was saying with the integer thing. So there is a possibility that that statement could be true, but like I said, it probably won't even be read because of this first if statement. But this turns the flashlight on, so that's probably due to the null state of the traits. So then the unknown distance 40 is equal to flashlight, and that will probably never be true because odds are there aren't going to be 40 different unknown things in the screen. Now, it could be possible if it got all the way up to the top of the environment. Things are a little more condensed. If it just had the radar on, then everything in that screen would be unknown, and it could possibly see this, but I doubt that the environment that this instinct is written for has 40 different distances, 40 different unknowns, and it would set gun to 3, so that's irrelevant anyway. And actually no, so that's if unknown distance 40 is not equal to flashlight. So this is always true, I believe. And then this one would be irrelevant no matter what. But it's about the same thing. Then it turns the gun off. So then else then flashlight equals -7. Now here is an interesting thing because the negatives weren't even supposed to be possible. So there was initially a part of the variable mutations that allowed certain variables, certain traits, characteristics to be adjusted by a random number between -10 and 10, which allowed for negative numbers to occur. It didn't occur to me that negative numbers would be irrelevant in the decision-making process because there are no negative coordinates and none of the variables can be negative. So I removed that, but like I was saying, if the program has already been run for a decent amount of time, then those negative numbers and negative traits have already been propagated. Now this is not the error I was worried about, but the error that I am worried about is the fact that the -7 showed up there specifically, because the traits that could be edited like that in mutations were only traits that could be associated with the what am I thinking of? Parameters. So in the if statement where it says if blank is equal to, greater than, less than, or equal to, greater than or equal to, or not equal to blank 2, then do this. So in the actual if statement, the those numbers were allowed to be negative. And so those were the ones that could be edited in this fashion. And so this number here has been propagated and shifted into this position, which is a position that I don't want it to be in. So obviously somewhere in the code the traits are being shifted. Now down here you can see that it's reading in an error, which means that the number that it read in is not a number associated with any specific variable or parameter. So that number could be negative, it could be higher than 407, and then after that it's just kind of pointless because all of the variables are associated with a number between 1 and 407. So this is feeding back an error because it is not equal to any of those variables, and so this is something that would crash the program. This is something that would cause problems, because the code is trying to read in, it's reading in a number that is being spit out by a function, but if the function doesn't spit out a number, then it doesn't have anything to compare to the other numbers. So then it becomes problematic, because something that is a non-type is being compared to an integer, which doesn't work. You can't compare the lack of something to the number 5. I mean, I know you could compare 0, but that doesn't really work when the zero is the lack of something, but at the same time it's not nothing, it is number. I'm talking about, like, it's not a shoe, it's not a tree, it's not a word, it's nothing. So you can't compare that to a number because it doesn't have any standing. All of these errors that you see, I just realized that wasn't even on the screen, but there you go, that's the error that I was talking about. And all of these errors that you're seeing are problems that are occurring in the process of rewriting the program. So I need to go check that section of the code when I get the chance, but like I said, I won't be able to stream on Saturday, so I will most definitely have that at least located by next Wednesday. Okay. That's assuming that I am in the right in thinking that the section of code in the child function, in the child program, is causing problems. If it's not, then I will continue to look for the problem, but there is no guarantee that I will find the error. But like I said, if I will continue to run the AI and run Jeffrey, because I just want to see how far it will get even with these mutations. Now, these mutations are a little difficult to work with because the reason it works in evolution is because if an organism dies, then it knows that that trait didn't work. I mean, it may try it a couple times, but it doesn't really propagate because that organism dies. Now, the problem is if some of these traits can be sleeper traits. So if they're in these elif statements, then the program doesn't necessarily read those unless the if statement is false. So if the if statement is something that's always true, like flashlight is equal to flashlight, I'm not going to see if it has it in here. Where on here? Okay, flashlight equal to sprint could be true. That's an interesting decision. If flashlight is equal to sprint, then move equals 0. So if sprint is on and the flashlight is on, it stops moving. I guess that kind of conserves battery. It's not a bad decision. But so say there was an error here, then if this is something that's always true, like flashlight is equal to flashlight, then this decision would never be read, so it would never crash based off of that decision. Now, there could be errors somewhere else that are causing problems, but let's assume that this is the only problematic spot. So though that error would not cause problems, and it would receive a high score based off of the fact that it actually survived and didn't crash in the entire time. So it is possible that it could become the new best program. So if it becomes the new best program, then it can then create child programs. But with those child programs, maybe something changes with the if statement, and this error continues to exist. So if the if statement changes, then the child program will crash, because it will find that the if statement is false, and then it will move on to the elif statement, which has an error in it. So it's not necessarily the parents which are crashing. If the parents were crashing, then the problems wouldn't propagate, because if people die before they have sex, then they don't have babies. It's pretty straightforward. So that is the general idea of the problem, and so I hope to solve that problem, but like I said, I will have to use the current running of the AI as a benchmark for the intelligence of running the AI for this long. I am hoping that if I fix this problem, it should be a significant jump in intelligence. Now, obviously, it will still flail around at the start, just like it always does. It will. Jeffrey will continue to spin around in circles until he finds that his environment is safe, or he decides to go find a new environment. But what I hope to achieve is, if there are no errors, then I won't have to continue changing the environment, and Jeffrey can focus on the environment he's stuck in, so that he can learn to move on to different environments or succeed in that current environment. So like I said, I have goals for the AI project. I'm going to make sure I'm remembering all of them. I'm pulling up the note on my phone. Okay, so project goals. So I want him to survive for more than 5 minutes. I want him to hunt. I want him to surprise me in a good way. And the problem is, he did surprise me, but it was in a bad way, because I wasn't expecting him to cheat the system by shooting the wall and sprinting at the same time. Now I am sort of tickled that the AI was able to figure that out, but at the same time, that isn't the result I'm looking for. So obviously the actual fitness score of the project is not adequate. And I would like to add a sub-goal in there. It's a simpler goal that I think is very achievable. I want Jeffrey to be able to locate food and eat it, because in this entire running, Jeffrey has only accidentally run into food. So basically, he has only survived as long as his health would let him before he was reset to the start. I am considering that would be something that I could add, is that if Jeffrey dies, he gets a spike of negative score. Now, he already gets very low score if his health is that low, but I don't know, I'll have to play around with it. But that's what I'm going to be working on in the days to come. I want to thank you for watching, and I've been talking for a bit here, so I will be signing off soon. Just checking to see if there's any questions in the chat. It's not looking like there are any. So I know I started a little late, so I wasn't expecting to have a huge audience or anything. So I will be signing off. Like I said, I won't be streaming on Saturday, but I will be streaming next Wednesday. I'll be on spring break, actually, so I'll be at my hometown. So there's the possibility that the internet won't be as fast there, but hopefully that won't become a problem. Internet hasn't seemed to be the deciding factor for whether or not I can stream. It's more of a programming and computer problem. But I also hope to have that resolved soon. So I will talk to you on next Wednesday. Thank you for watching.